This is the Classic Auto Mall podcast. Broadcast from the studios inside the Classic Auto Mall in Morgantown, Pennsylvania. Yes, the Classic Auto Mall is a real mall just 1 hour west of Philadelphia at Pennsylvania Turnpike exit 298, featuring nearly 1,000 classic, vintage, and barn-find vehicles for sale under one climate-controlled roof. Now, here's your host, Classic Auto Mall president and the man with all the toys, Stewart Howden.
Good thing it's a real mall, though. We want to make sure and be clear of that. People might think it's a facade when they're driving down the turnpike and they see this classic auto mall. People do think that.
Well, you had an idea of a concept of some kind of building that had like a Rolls Royce grill in the front. I think we should do that here.
Motoropolis, that was called.
I think that would be cool. Driving down the freeway or the freeway. What do they call it here?
The interstate. Turnpike. Actually, they call it the interstate in the east and south, but it's turnpike.
The turnpike, on
this particular road, because this is actually a pay toll road, and I think turnpike has something to do with paying.
Yeah, it does. And
so somehow that means that.
But you can see classic automobile, but people don't know what it is because it kind of is. Well, there's giant car photographs on it, but besides that. I love your idea about a giant grill in the front.
We had a giant grill. We had a project in Branson back in 2000, 2001 called Motoropolis, and it was going to be a full-time 365-day-a-year auto show, like you go to the Philly Auto Show or the New York Auto Show, but it would be a permanent display. All the manufacturers would have X amount of space. You'd have a classic car element, classic cars for sale. You'd have a museum. You'd have a gift shop. You'd have a diner. And then there was a test track in the back.
Wow.
But the front of the building was a Duesenberg grill with two headlights and a big hood ornament, and it was a spectacular entrance. It really was, and it's so disappointing that project never got off the ground. I mean, we got really far with it, but unfortunately, we had a little incident in our country at that time, and I hate to blame that incident on something that happened business-wise, but literally people stopped taking our phone calls after 9/11. The manufacturers were all in, and this was going to be our swan song. This was going to be, I wouldn't be here today if that had happened. No. So I don't know if that's a good thing.
Some things are meant to be.
Or a bad
unfortunately,
thing. But it was a lot of fun working on that project, and I think that would be an amazing facade to do the front. And it would probably be cheaper to do today because you could have guys make it out of they could have a 3D printer or print of it, and somehow you could make our whole entrance. You could walk through a grill.
That would be kind of cool, actually.
It would be very cool.
Yep.
So I'll
keep that in mind.
I'll get right on that, and we'll have.
And nobody steal that idea.
If you've got another mall and you're selling classic cars out of it, please do not use that idea, or we'll come after you.
Motoropolis.
Oh,
Motoropolis.
That sounds like Karopolis. So
it's a Greek car show.
Yes, it's. Oh, never mind. What do you think our inventory is today?
Somewhere in the 1,100 range.
No.
1,000 to 1,100, somewhere in between there.
1057.
Oh, there you go, right, dead center.
Dead center of it. Well, not dead center, between 11 and 10, but 1,057. We're at probably a more manageable amount of cars in here. We were getting a little bit full.
Really?
Just a little. Just a few little.
Amazing what 50 less cars can do.
It really is. It's surprising that it makes any difference at all.
Right.
But it does. It makes a huge difference. And so we're glad to have a little bit of breathing room. And it's harder to get around and see the cars. And granted, we know that 95% of our cars that we sell are sold online. And therefore, really doesn't matter what happens in the building. But we have a lot of people who come here who like to see the cars and look at the cars. And sometimes it can be more difficult if we have more cars in inventory to get around in here. So we apologize for that if you come out here. But don't forget the admission charge is $0.
Yes, so don't complain.
Don't complain.
We don't really get any. We don't get many complaints. Even when there's areas where you cannot walk through two cars, people still enjoy the experience because there's just so much.
Still plenty to see.
Oh yeah.
The thing about 1,057 cars is there's more than you can see in one sitting, and probably in two sittings if you're really looking. It's also easy to kind of get tunnel vision in here and not see everything. But it's funny.
It's true.
We'll see people come in half hour before we close, and we'll tell them, "Hey, look, we're closing in half an hour," and they're like, "Okay, we'll rush through." 25 minutes later, they're still in the first showroom. They can't get out of there.
It really is tunnel vision. And the other thing is people get disoriented here. I mean, it's a very simple design,
but very similar.
similar. And when your face isn't buried in a car, or you're reading every great description that's written on them.
Oh, those descriptions are fantastic.
You pick your head up and you're like, what part of the mall am I in?
Yeah.
And where's the exit? Where's the bathroom?
And there are big signs at the end of the mallways that say north and east and south and west, but it's still confusing to people because just because it's obvious to us doesn't mean it's obvious to everybody else. It looks the same. Kathy, literally, when we first started here, my wife, who is our office manager, literally put a plant at the mall, at the hallway where our offices are, because she couldn't remember. She's directionally challenged, she could not remember where our offices were. She'd call me on her cell phone. Can you please tell me?
I'm at the Holiday Inn. Can you tell me which way to go?
Tell me which way is. Where are we? So anyway, a more manageable amount of cars to have in here right now certainly helps. But you know, bring them. Whenever you're ready, just bring your car.
Because they're selling.
They are selling like crazy. You know, that's a good segue into our next segment.
That's right.
You know,
that's what it was.
Where are they selling to, Steve?
Where are they selling
they selling to? How about Mifflintown, Pennsylvania, Coon Rapids, Iowa, Torvilliers, France, Langhorne, Pennsylvania, Hazlitt, New Jersey, Glenmore, Pennsylvania, Coatesville, Pennsylvania, Pottsville, Pennsylvania, Cressona, I'm sure I've got that wrong, Pennsylvania, Mercerville, New Jersey, Topton, Pennsylvania, Sylmar, California, Newmanstown, Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Lisbon, Portugal.
Wow.
Stafford, Virginia, Henderson, Nevada, Staunton, Virginia, Warrington, Pennsylvania, Williamsport, Pennsylvania, Ormond Beach, Florida, Chico, California, and France.
Another French.
Another Frenchie.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Nope, 2 California, six states and two countries. Wife went to college in Chico, California.
Really?
It was the #1 party school rated by Playboy magazine for several years in a row.
Did she know that ahead of time, or
no? She left and got a real education.
Because you're a real partier, so I'm sure if you didn't meet you there.
No, I was not at Chico. And I heard Warrington, Pennsylvania in there, which is my sort of hometown.
Old stomping grounds, as we like to say.
Yeah, that's Holbert country.
Yeah, that's right. That is where Al Holbert, and his shop was in Warrington.
And it was his house and his shop and his dealership and everything else.
What was his dealership? That's right.
It was Holbert Porsche
Audi.
Porsche Audi Volkswagen.
Right.
One of the first. I think he was the second Volkswagen dealer in the country in the 50s. And then it became Porsche Audi, and still there, but it's owned by it's not Thompson. Sloan maybe.
Sloan or.
Ooh, I'm gonna. Anyway.
Send a letter.
Yeah.
Podcast at classicautomall.com and tell us that Steve is wrong.
It's Porsche Warrington up there on 611. Great part of the country.
His old stomping ground. So you could tell us some stories about those days?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, we'll save that for a later date. Because we have nothing to talk about today. So we have no guest. It's just me and you.
My father had an auto parts store in Warrington in the mid-'70s.
Did he sell to them?
Well, he knew that. He grew up with the Holbert, so it was right up the street, and they had something to do with him getting the store. But nobody lived in Warrington in 1970. It was before the real estate boom in central Bucks County. There were still country clubs and farms and fields, and so for a number of other reasons, including the fact that it was a very low population in Warrington. It was still country. His store didn't last more than 3 years, and then we moved out west. But so Warrington, and he grew up in Warrington.
So for those who are listening who don't know who Al Holbert is,
world sports car, one of the greatest
Porsches,
legendary sports car racing, and in IMSA and others.
Was he a dealer first and then a driver, or was he always a driver, or how did that?
Well, his father is legendary Bob Holbert, Robert Holbert, who was one of the great sports car drivers of the 50s and early 60s, and so there was already a legend kind of built in. But they had a shop. It was called Holbert's Garage. And then he would started selling MGs and Porsches and Volkswagens in the very early days. So it was a combination of race shop and dealership.
Yeah, and where I grew up, you didn't see a lot of Volkswagens and Porsches and Audis back in the early 70s. Sure. I mean, there was one dealer I think that had Porsches, but I don't even remember even seeing a 911 until I was well into my teens.
Right.
You know, it wasn't like it was something you would see around the neighborhood or whatever.
It was exotic.
Yeah, very exotic. Then, yeah. And of course, I always thought my dad was. I never forget. He was looking to buy a car when he bought his '67 Jaguar we talked about. But he went and looked at 914 Porsches, and he just didn't like it. It just wasn't for him, and ended up getting an E-Type, which turned out he really loved. Except I hated it because it was the one driving to school where it was cold and wet. And,
yeah.
You know, there wasn't much protection from the elements.
Was it convert?
Yeah.
Spider?
Yeah.
No, not Spider.
Roadster.
Roadster. Yeah. Thank you. Wrong nationality.
So, anyway, thanks again to the Pat Travers Band for our podcast music that they so graciously allow us to use. And speaking of music, did you see the Grammys the other night?
I don't partake in the Grammys.
Well, I fast forward.
I boycott the Grammys, frankly.
I fast forward through it. But Tracy Chapman did Fast Cars with Luke. Well, wait a minute.
No, I mean, that's everywhere now. That's the one redeeming moment in the Grammys. Two. Apparently, were there two?
Joni Mitchell.
Okay,
that was pretty redeeming.
Okay,
that was the two that I fast forward. And Billy Joel has a new song out.
I saw that.
And it was
a new old song, right?
No. It's a new song. Yeah,
because I think they released something that he recorded in the 70s as well.
No, he hadn't had a new release in 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
So it was I don't know. It's like Neil Young and Elton John and Billy Joel and the Stones and Paul McCartney. It's really hard to release anything new. That's
it makes you relevant.
That makes you relevant.
Yeah.
How are you going to redo Levon? Or 52nd Street, or Heart of Gold, or any of those songs like that.
Yeah, so. It's tough, and I mean, Bruce still releases stuff, but it's more about the concerts than the new music.
Could you tell me a new song of his? No, you couldn't. That's the problem. You couldn't.
Exactly.
And of course, it was Tracy Chapman, "Fast Cars," which is a cool song, and she hasn't performed it in many, many, many years. Mm-hmm. And Luke Bryan, a country star, I think he recorded it, but he performs it, and it's one of his favorite songs. Mm-hmm. And he sang a duet with her, and he was fantastic. And I'm thinking,
he looked a little nervous to me. He was like,
I think he was a little intimidated. Yeah, I think he was a little, his reverence to her was, a big deal, because she is an idol. Probably.
It's a good song. She had others. I don't know if she had others or not.
Not that I know of. It's like the Knack, My Sharona.
Yeah, right. One hit wonders.
So tell me the other song that the Knack did. I don't know. But you could also say that about popular bands. Even Lynyrd Skynyrd. It's like there's Freebird and then all the other songs that aren't Freebird. That's the thing. It's like everything, it's Freebird and every song that isn't Freebird.
Right.
So, but anyway, I watched a little bit of the Grammys. And of course, they missed by a day the passing of Toby Keith, which is what a great singer he was. I mean, people have misconceptions about. Here I go on way on our
music.
I'm going to have to do a music
segment
show.
One is music. His music segment.
But Toby Keith was a great singer. I mean, he really had that country sounding voice. Yeah. And he had a car collection too. He was a car collector. He bought Harold Shedd, who produced all of Alabama's #1 hits. Mm-hmm. Who has probably nice mailbox money. That means every quarter you open your mailbox and there's just a check there for producing, songs from 100 years ago. It doesn't matter. And Harold had a beautiful 30 Lincoln Model L Roadster. He sold it to Toby. But Toby had probably arguably the greatest country song ever written. I'll never smoke weed with Willie again.
Right.
And talking about going on his bus and smoking weed with him and how you don't want to do that. And so anyway, rest in peace, Toby Keith. He was good friends with my father-in-law, and also with another dear friend of mine who's passed, and just a great down-to-earth guy who got stomach cancer.
Yeah, it sucks.
Damn, cancer sucks, doesn't it? Anyway, when we return, we'll talk about some of our new inventory here at the Classic Auto Mall Podcast. We'll see you in a couple minutes.
Whether you want to buy or sell a classic, collectible, or special interest vehicle, you need to visit the Classic Auto Mall website for more information. If you're looking to buy, you can easily search our inventory of more than 1,000 vehicles on the web at classicautomall.com.
And we're back with the Classic Auto Mall Podcast from the Classic Auto Mall Studios in Morgantown, Pennsylvania, talking about music.
Yeah, we're talking about music and
cars,
car collections.
There's a lot of musicians have a lot of great car collections.
I know he was good friends with Sammy Hagar, and Sammy Hagar is obviously one of the prime car collectors.
Oh yeah, he's the guy. I mean, he has a LaFerrari, so that trumps anything.
Yeah, and that was the one. Was that the one where he went to Italy and they had to mold the seat around him?
And he was going to sell it at Barrett-Jackson this year. That's right. And the battery pack went bad, and apparently it's got to be shipped to Modena.
Oh my god!
To fix that.
Really? So what, was it there in Scottsdale and it just fell through, or right before that?
I think it was right before that, and I think actually he's going to offer it. They're going to do another Scottsdale auction in the fall at Barrett-Jackson. And so it's going to be at that sale, which will not be a 6-day or 7-day event like it is now. It'll be a 3-day auction, which is what most auctions are. 500-600 cars
I imagine Sammy Hagar goes to his mailbox every day and
gets a check. Yeah. Think about it. He was with Montrose, Van Halen, his own career,
Incredible.
Cabo Wabo.
Yeah.
The tequila is like
he's doing it right too, and he's living right.
Living right.
Good guy.
Still in his, he's in his 70s. Toby Keith was talking about, and in one of his last interviews, he really wanted to do a podcast, because he said, my list of guests would be phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
He could call Sammy, and Sammy'd say, let's do it now. You don't have to schedule anything months ahead of time like us. That's the toughest part about this gig, is coordinating a time for people to be on the podcast, because just because it works for us doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody else, or vice versa.
That's right. It's tough.
It's a little bit tough. So, speaking of Modena, as we were just talking about, I saw the movie.
Ferrari
movie.
Ferrari, just called Ferrari.
Just Ferrari. No.
Oh, how was that?
Well,
I'm not too enthusiastic.
It was, so we rented it. Actually, we bought it.
You watched it at home?
At home.
Okay.
Because I have a Curve.
You have a big giant TV.
Not that giant. It's only like 95.
It's the biggest one in the neighborhood, probably.
It's bigger than the room that it's in. It's a curved, and it's got great sound because we have the Sonos speakers with the surround sound and all that. And surround sound probably sounds antiquated.
Yeah, right. There's probably another name for it.
Yeah, there's certainly another name by now.
I know what you mean, though.
Yeah. And most of our listeners do, I think.
Right.
So we bought it because it was $4 more to buy it than to rent it. So I guess it's just on my Amazon account forever.
Okay. When you get the urge to watch it again, it's right there.
So interesting thing about the movie, it was released on Christmas Day of last year, 2023. It's now today is February the 7th, 2024, and this airs the first time on February the 10th, 2024. Anyway, it came out 2023 Christmas Day. The budget was $95 million. The box office so far, $37 million.
Ouch.
Yeah, that's starring Adam Driver and Penelope Cruz, which I didn't even know who Adam Driver was. And I didn't even recognize him in the movie. And then I saw a picture of him with long black hair, and I was like, okay, I kind of know that guy.
Yeah. And what's his name is a driver?
McDreamy.
Yeah. What's his real name?
Patrick.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, thanks. It's the one thing I didn't put in all Dempsey, thank you.
Yeah.
With all my notes here, my thorough notes that have everything about it, that's the one thing I didn't put down.
Right.
But Patrick Dempsey is a race car driver himself.
That's right.
He races Porsches, right? And so he was a natural fit for the movie. Interesting parts about it. Number one, the accents, and I'm good with foreigners speaking English. Like Kathy my wife has a very difficult time understanding some accents. It's very difficult for her to pick up on what they're saying. And I don't have that trouble. I'm very good with that. But it was difficult. There were times where their accents, especially Penelope Cruz's, you had to really back it up. What did she say?
Well, her normal accent is pretty thick.
Yeah.
Was she doing an Italian accent on top of that?
A little, not really, more just her accent.
Yeah,
but,
okay.
But it was a little bit difficult to hear. And of course, had you been into the theater, I don't have my remote where I can back it up. So
they have closed captioning, though. You could probably put closed captioning on.
Oh my God! What next? Do I get a hearing aid?
Yeah, no. That's what my wife had. We have closed captioning on everything, so she can read it. But Penelope Cruz, back in the day, didn't really matter what her accent,
what she said or didn't say, or I didn't really care. None of that really mattered a whole lot.
Didn't really matter.
The thing about closed captioning on a movie, though, is that I find myself never seeing the movie. I'm watching the closed captioning, and
plus
then
it's on delay, or it's a second behind, or something.
Just enough to, when you're
they're past the scene and they're still reading from last scene. Yeah, I get that.
So anyway, they some of the critique of the movie was downshifting on the back straight or at the Mille Miglia in 1957 when you're going down a 10-mile straight. And they can downshift to pass somebody. Well, you're not downshifting if you're at top speed. If you're going 200 or 180 miles an hour.
You might break something.
Yeah, you downshift. You go down a gear without, it doesn't happen that way. And the crash scenes were over-exaggerated. I mean, they hit a curb at the test track in Modena when they were trying to get the lap record. And this thing shot into the air like 80 feet. It was like, whoa, that seems a little bit.
Like a Transformer movie.
Yeah, it seemed a little unrealistic in that. So it was directed by Michael Mann, who was Miami Vice.
Okay.
And I guess he's getting older up there, but the sounds of the vehicles were pretty good. Some of the cars sounded almost NASCAR-like.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was. I don't know. Maybe I'm being a little harsh on it, but Ford versus Ferrari was such a great movie. I thought. Maybe not everybody thinks that, and I don't care.
Right.
But this was you had to really want to like it. I think the reaction from my stepson and wife were like, "No, that was pretty good." You know, they weren't thrilled by it. And Ford versus Ferrari, we all loved. So, and the movie, Ferrari movie, focuses on the year 1957 when Ferrari raced at the Mille Miglia, and there's a pretty graphic crash scene that they have where 9 spectators died, and that was true. That wasn't just made up for the movie. Yeah, it did happen. I mean, the Mille Miglia was a 1,000-mile race, and it was through countrysides and streets, and they refueled with crude big funnels and just a can, and it was. And
people were out there.
People were just out there watching it, and could be right up against the road and go right past the front yard of their house, at 180 miles an hour in a Testarossa
and
Ferrari.
Sheep were crossing the street. And
sheep, those pesky sheep
on the countryside.
Those countryside sheep. But anyway, there were some parts that were very enjoyable, and some parts you think that could have been done a little bit better. And I know it's very, very difficult to make a car movie. And especially when you just focus on one particular, like really 1 year, 1957. I mean, how do you sum up Enzo Ferrari in 1 year?
Right.
But listen, at the end of the day, I guess the box office tells you everything you need to know. Of course, different time for movies right now.
That's true.
Movies are not the same.
Already able to rent it at home. So.
I know. I'm renting it at home.
Does that count in box office? I don't even know how they.
I don't know.
I'm so anti-Hollywood right now. I care less. But I would like to suggest a movie. As I was writing up you're going to talk about a GT, the Shelby GT-H, right. But we have a GT350 tribute.
Yeah.
And I was reading the story of, I went back and listened to our interview with Chuck Cantwell because I thought it'd be cool to pull like a quote from that and use it in the description. And I make reference to it in the description. That we had him here. He was sitting right here. I mean,
the father of the GT350.
And I really didn't. I mean, I was so busy with technical stuff here that I didn't realize who was here.
Right.
And it'd be great to do a movie because they created the GT50 to beat
Corvette.
Not Corvettes. Yeah, Corvettes. Thanks. So it should be Ford versus Corvette.
Right.
Do a whole other movie. And Chuck Cantwell is the center character.
I like that.
And
Chuck is a great guy, and he's so down to earth that you almost, like you said, you almost kind of forget that he is. It's like Pete Brock, the guy who designed the Cobra Daytona.
Right.
We've met him quite a few times, and you forget who you're talking to.
Yeah.
It's just another car guy.
Right.
Dick Vermeil, the coach of the Eagles, was like that. I mean, you meet him, you see him out and about. You talk to him, but you forget. He won a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
It's not nothing.
It was pretty impressive. So I think there's a whole other movie there to be made, Ford versus Corvette, because there was a real battle between the two of them, and Chuck Cantwell was on the front line of that development.
Absolutely. And of course, we had one of the guys, Brent Fenimore, on the show, who has worked on very heavily on the Series 1 Shelby, which was the only purpose-built car that Shelby ever made.
Right.
Everything else, they took another car and modified it, which was fine. I mean, that was a great formula for them.
We sold ours, right? I mean, the one that we had here, the Series 1. Right?
Yeah, the Series 1 sold. That one was, sorry about that. We'll fix that in the mix. The Series 1 that we had here was really interestingly documented. There are lots of pictures from the factory when the guy picked it up, and a lot of really cool stuff that a lot of Series 1 owners don't have or didn't have or didn't think to keep. People are in moments that they should have. If you had a camera like we have cameras now on some of the things, I think of the times that certain things that have happened that, if I only had a camera.
Right.
But who's carrying around a big bulky SLR at the time?
Right.
Nobody.
It's like the time when Steve Perry of Journey was looking at my Grand National at a car show in Westlake Village, California, and I can't prove it. I cannot prove it
and you can't prove whether he liked it or not. He might have said, amateur.
I mean, missed opportunity there because we didn't have cameras back in the days.
Didn't have cameras. I sat at the Rainbow Bar and Grill in Hollywood, California, and had cocktails with David Lee Roth one night on a Friday night early. Yeah, exactly.
Picture or it didn't happen.
Show me did I ever tell that story?
Oh, yeah,
I've told that story
about 20 times, but that's all right. People love that story.
where I was making Mr. Roth uncomfortable.
Right. That's right.
Yeah. talking about the little more somber, the 9 spectators that died in the Mille Miglia in 1957. In 55 at Le Mans, Mercedes, the 300 SLR, had a car pull out in front of it and went over the back of it and killed 80. They say 81 to 89. Wow. 83 is usually the amount of spectators that were killed, including and the driver Pierre Levey, and 120 were injured. But there was 300,000 people at the 1955 Le Mans race. Wow. And that 300 SLR Mercedes, what an amazing machine that was. And Mercedes withdrew. Did you know this? They withdrew from motor racing until 1989 for 34 years. But I just found out today, not 100% sure, and if you know, podcast at classicautomall.com, that they had decided to end their racing before the crash. So it wasn't the crash, and they said, "Oh, we crashed. Oh gosh, we're gonna stop racing." It was pre-decided prior to the race that this was probably going to be their last race. I don't think they either didn't see the value in it or felt like it was getting too dangerous. Because you got to remember track, and they once that happened, they closed all the European tracks for a couple of years, and the Mille Miglia never happened again after 1957. Oh, wow. In its pure sense of the countryside and all that. There's a purpose-built, whatever. But yeah, I mean, 83 people killed.
I'm sure safety measures came out of that experience and saved lives later on. But
well, just like when Ayrton Senna died in Formula One, or when you've had wheels or tires go off of NASCAR cars or Indy cars up into the crowd and kill people. I mean, it's dangerous.
Yeah, things are moving.
They are moving, and it's not. People tend to get false sense of security because we're at a track and there's a fence.
Yeah,
it's a chain link fence.
Right.
My minivan could get through that.
We were at our club met at what's the drag strip in Michigan, a small drag. Anyway, you're right there on the wall, and I'm like, I don't feel particularly comfortable being this close to, and they were just street cars. And
if you went to Riverside or OCIR, Orange County International Raceway, which is a drag strip out in California, there would be a huge grassy area between you and Pomona was the same way. There was a big space between you. Bristol, literally the same thing. Fence, track. I mean, you're standing within 15 feet of these things, and they could throw a blower, and they did.
You could feel it.
You could absolutely feel it. So anyway, when we return, we'll get to some of our new inventory, which we haven't spoken about yet, on the Classic Auto Mall podcast. We'll see you in a minute.
Buying and selling via consignment is safe, easy, and secure. We advertise, sell, and ship worldwide. And if you'd like to know all the advantages of selling your car through consignment, the information's available on our website, or you can talk to a classic car specialist who can answer all your questions. Plus, you can easily search our inventory online at classicautomall.com.
And we're back with the Classic Auto Mall podcast. Do I say that every time?
Yeah, well, the people should know what they're listening to.
Well, we would hope so. I think that, and if you haven't tuned in anywhere else, other than maybe America's Web Radio or going off of our website, we're on just about every podcast site.
Every one you can imagine. You don't even have to list them all because there's too many.
It's too many to list. But trying to do that. Yeah, it's
all the major ones and all the minor ones.
iHeartRadio is one of the bigger ones. Apple is a big one. Buzzsprout.
But really, what we want to do also is. Randy is loading these podcasts on YouTube. So if you want to watch the YouTube or just have it as sound in the background as you do your work at your desktop, then check out the Classic Auto Mall YouTube channel.
Yeah, it's really
popping.
It really is popping. And we've always decided long ago, and we've continued that decision that we want this to be more of a talk show than a podcast. That you would more David Letterman, Johnny Carson than just the vocal part of it, the visual part of it as well too. And we show pictures of cars that we talk about that we've just recently started doing. And that kind of gives, people are so visual anymore. And we start talking about a 65 Ford Mustang Shelby GT350 GT-H Tribute. People may not know exactly what we're talking about. And you can't assume that anybody knows what the hell it is we're going on in these
pictures
brains.
Are always helpful. And like I said, there's 1,000 cars here that are all have interesting stories.
That's why I like Denny's and Waffle House, because they have a picture of what you're getting. Say, I'll take that.
And it better look like that.
It better be exact, and they never do.
IHOP does with the little circle smiley face.
Is that the Rudy Tooty?
Yeah, Rudy Tooty Fruity.
Most things don't look like you see a hamburger from, although I got to tell you, I'm sorry to digress here, but I was going through Wendy's the other day, and they had this ad that you see right as you're at the drive-thru for this triple-decker hamburger with bacon on it. You could smell the grease off a picture.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable. Just think of the amount of calories.
Sure. Oh. How many did you order?
I did not order. I do not order. I get the junior bacon cheeseburger, which is one little teeny piece of bacon and a little teeny hamburger. Taste. It's a little taste, just to kind of.
They put Vaseline and stuff. There's all kinds of tricks in food photography. It's a whole art, actually.
Yeah, milk in the cereal is actually glue, like Elmer's glue.
Oh, is that right? Yeah. That's a good one.
Well, see, I know all kinds of inane trivia.
It's
an
LA thing.
Yeah, you would know that.
Advertising agencies and hand models and all that.
Yeah,
stuff.
Hand models. Don't be careful with my hands.
Yeah, they're insured.
They're insured by Lloyd's of London.
Hey, what new inventories come in?
Hey, Steve, thanks for that great segue. How about the Shelby GT-H Tribute, Raven Black over black? It's a fully restored, miles deep Raven Black paint. I mean, you could dive into it, it looks like.
It is.
And it's rust-free, 289 V8 with a top-loader manual. And it goes like gel, but I think that meant to say hell.
Goes like gel. That's interesting, like black Jello. Is it a manual?
It is a top loader. I don't know.
I thought it was. I know. Let me stutter a little more.
Yeah.
while you look it up, because we had some conversation about GT-H's actually did come with an automatic and a manual. In fact, 40% of them were automatics, which I did not know. I thought they all must have been stick because they're super racy and fancy.
Well, it's amazing how much information you know about cars these days.
Everyone is a research project.
For those of you who don't know, as I'm trying to Google something and I'm not doing it very well, Steve now writes all of our descriptions for all of our cars. It's a 4-speed manual. It says, but wait a minute. Let me tell you one way to know.
Photographs.
You look at that photograph.
We have 85 photographs of this car.
There's the 3 pedals in that one.
Okay, good. So it just that car brought up a conversation. Maybe I was talking to Justin or somebody about did GT-H's come automatic, and they did.
Right. And you know what's funny? Shelby Mustangs in the automatic guise used to be that it was very difficult. When I say guys, I don't mean G-U-Y-S. I mean G-U-I-S-E. And its form came in automatic, and people used to not care for the automatic when you would try to sell an automatic Shelby Mustang of any year era. They were hard to sell. Now people like them because there's a couple things about a manual transmission. If you're in a parade or any kind of slow traffic, your left leg goes to sleep pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Number one. And number two, when you're driving on the highway or down the turnpike or down the interstate, if you only have a 4-speed manual, you're dying for another gear. If you got an automatic, got a little more breathing room to run a little bit faster speeds without sounding like the thing's going to blow up.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And this is just back to this car, because I mean, it's a beautiful car.
It really is.
And you could drive this without the worry of having a 6-figure actual GT-H, and nobody would know the difference.
No, they wouldn't. And of course, it argues or begs the question, how do you, if somebody comes up to you at a car show, do you immediately lead with, this is a replica, or this is a clone, or this is a tribute, or all the different names that we use for those.
If I had a placard in front of the car, it would definitely say.
You would say that, but do you lead with that if that's your car at a car show? Is that the first thing you would tell somebody? They come up and say, "Hey, man, that's a nice car."
I think this one is so well done that I would have no problem leading with that information.
Right. Yeah, and that's part of it. I mean, it's a tribute, which means it's a recognition or an honor of the original. That's not everybody can afford an original.
It's like an Elvis tribute artist.
Or a Cobra, a 427 Cobra replica. I mean, of course, not many people can afford those at all.
That's right.
Not many people have seen one in person. That's the interesting thing about the one we have here, is that most people that come in here, even, degenerate car guys like we are, say, I've never seen one in person.
Right.
So
exactly.
That tells you a lot about how rare they really are. But everybody knows what it is, and everybody's seen a version of it out at whatever car show. But even my little replica that I have, I pull up anywhere to car guys, and they're all over it. They're oogling it. They're oogling.
It is the ultimate. That is the ultimate car guy.
It really is. And that's why we have this right behind us.
Yeah, it is.
And if you're listening, this is a black and white picture of a Cobra. Or a version of a Cobra, I don't know. But anyway, with the knockoff wheels and the Goodyear white wall tires and the wind wings and the little jacks back here and all the cool stuff. Yep. So anyway, if you get a chance, check our website out, classicautomall.com. You can see the GT-H tribute. Also in this week, new inventory, 1957 Triumph TR3 Roadster. Have you seen this thing? It is so cool.
Oh, I like
black over red.
Oh, yeah.
1991 cc inline four, which was more power than most of the British cars had in that era. Dual SU carbs, 4-speed manual, leather seating, just a really neat looking car. The black is very industrial looking for this car, but it's really, if you get a chance, again, go to our website and check it out. It's very, very cool.
See, these were the early racing cars in America. This was the early sports car movement, and Triumphs and MGs and all those cars were raced.
When the guys came back from World War II,
that's right.
After they'd been in Europe and they saw MGs and Triumphs and Austin Healey's and all these British cars, they all wanted one.
That's right.
They were all like, oh man, we need one of those over here. And the ones that had the wherewithal, the financial wherewithal to do it, and or just the gumption to make it happen, either imported them over and I imagine the United States military probably brought quite a few of them back over on, a little extra room in a big cargo plane. Can you throw my MG on there?
Yeah, and again, to call back the Holbert family, that's really how he made his bread and butter, is servicing MGs in the 50s when nobody was servicing.
Nobody knew how to work on them. Volkswagens were the same way. Yeah. They were just foreign car. Yep. But this little TR3 is really, really cool. You don't see many of these, and it's funny. The door opening on the sill is so low to the ground, you almost feel like your elbow is going to drag on the ground.
You could literally reach out
and touch the ground.
Yeah. It's very cool, though. That's the way the MGs were to a point, too, the TGs and TFs.
And people not
TD
and TF, and well, what people don't realize, too, is they say, oh, you got to have a big American V8 to go fast and have fun driving a car. That's absolutely not true. A little sports car like a little TR3 or an MG or an Austin Healey, even the Sprite, they're a blast to drive at full gait.
This Triumph in particular made me want to look at 50s era.
Yeah, it makes you re-engage with that. Maybe I could have one.
I like my Z3, but there's something very charming about those.
They're charming and they're easy to work on too. So they're not expensive to work on, and they're easy to work on.
And at least in this area, there's a lot of guys who know these cars really well.
Yeah, it's amazing how many shops there are within. That are specialized in a type or style or a specific mark that do work around here. Yeah. And you find them, and a lot of times it's just a guy in his garage that's a separate piece of his house that he just gets out there and works on cars. And
very active clubs in this area, and probably the rest of the country too. Triumph clubs, MG clubs, and these guys know their stuff.
And we highly recommend that if you buy a particular car, whether it's a muscle car, whether it's an MG or a Triumph, get involved with the club.
For sure.
And it's a wealth of information. And you think, well, I can get everything I need on the internet. No, you can't. There's a lot of stuff. You can't get a true feel for if a guy is the right guy to work on your car or do body work on your car. You need to talk to people that have had it done.
Exactly.
First-hand experience on that, not just some Google review that the guy's pissed off and writes something harsh about him when it may or may not be true. But get involved with the clubs because, so number one, finding parts and things that are difficult to find is the best way to find them. And especially a lot of these guys are still old school enough that they don't do eBay and they don't.
That's exactly right.
They go to the swap meet. Why do you think Carlisle and Hershey are still so popular?
That's exactly right.
I mean, you would think that people would say, you know what? I don't want to buy a bumper and drag it all through the field to get to my car.
Right.
But people still do.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not going to say I'm the youngest one at Carlisle at the swap meets, but it's an older crowd, and these are old school guys, man, and they know way more than we could ever learn. Yeah,
it's funny. If you don't know what a part goes to, you just put it on your table at Carlisle, and somebody will come up and tell you what it's for.
For sure.
Like, well, that's a starter for a 57 Triumph.
It's amazing.
The breadth of knowledge out there that isn't found on the internet. I mean, those are things that you can't always necessarily. Just because it's out there on the internet doesn't mean that you can find it. Googling is an art in of itself.
It's tough. And really some of the best places are the forums where people are talking about it and recommend somebody, through reputation.
Yeah, you ought to check with him if you want to know about something.
So it's the conversations more than the sort of general information sheet.
And the way you Google things determines the way the response is. And sometimes I can have people say, well, I Googled it and I couldn't find it. And I Google it and I find it right away. And I say, well, what'd you put in? And it was something it was something that didn't dovetail into finding the right information that you want.
That is right.
Yeah, so Googling is an art. Maybe we could teach that. We could have a Google class. Anyway, 61 Chevrolet Corvette convertible roadster, tuxedo black and silver over red. This has got some interesting rock star provenance.
Oh, it does?
Yeah. Joey Kramer of Aerosmith owned this car, the drummer for Aerosmith.
Okay.
Owned this car. Apparently there is some serious documentation of this.
Okay,
or
good.
whatever, names.
Little provenance.
Near flawless restoration. NCRS and Bloomington Gold winner. Numbers matching 283, 270 horse V8. Just very correct example. It's really an amazing car. It ain't cheap,
right?
But if
you want a good restoration.
And of course, the interesting thing about the 61 and 62 Corvettes is that you would get a preview of the tail of the 63s, the Stingrays. And that tail was different and got them going in that direction. Right. So you're almost seeing a preview. And of course, you didn't know it at the time. And of course, when the 63s came out, people thought spaceships had landed on them. I mean, they were really revolutionary to people when they first came out. It was pretty interesting. And of course, the Stingray was pinned by Pete Brock, who did the Cobra Daytona.
Wow.
So he worked for Bill Mitchell, who had a contest over the design of the coupe. And Pete Brock won. I guess I don't know if that's the correct word, but they built it with lightness in mind and an independent rear end, and beyond that, they could do anything they wanted. So when we return, we'll finish up our new inventory and talk about a couple other things. I've got a bone to pick, not with you, just in general. So when we return to the Classic Auto Mall podcast, we'll see you in a minute.
Whether you want to buy or sell a classic, collectible, or special interest vehicle, you need to visit the Classic Auto Mall website for more information. If you're looking to buy, you can easily search our inventory of more than 1,000 vehicles on the web at classicautomall.com.
And we're back with the Classic Auto Mall podcast. We're talking about our new show we're going to do from here, a music show, Stewart's Toy Box or something.
Stewart's Music Emporium.
Or something like that. We'll have to come up with some catchy name for it. We want to do a program. We use the studio 52 hours a year, basically.
That's right.
And there's how many hours in a year?
52 and a half if technical stuff breaks.
How many hours are there in a year? In a year? How many hours?
1080 in a week.
Yeah.
So what is that? 30,000.
And we use it for 55 hours. So we're going to figure out a way to use it more and do a cool music show. Something from my background of the 70s and 80s stuff and 60s stuff that I listened to.
And then croutons. We're going to do food.
And then a food show as well, too, and talk about croutons. Anyway, some of the other new inventory you were just asking about the one sitting across the hallway, which we're not featuring this week, but we'll feature coming up. A 1916 Cole Touring. They made 40,000 of those, and there's like 79 accounted for, which is unusual because, there's a lot of Fords and Chevys. Of course, they made millions and millions and millions, but there's cars that they made less of that there's way more than 79 still around and about. So
interesting.
Anyway, one of the other new pieces of inventory in 1949 Chrysler New Yorker Highlander convertible. The Highlander, I guess, was the top of the line. It's yellow over oxblood with that cool plaid Highlander interior. It's really a cool looking car. Fluid drive semi-automatic, which means it doesn't have a clutch in the true sense of the word. It's kind of a hybrid between an automatic and a manual.
Okay.
You have to shift it, but you don't have to use a clutch, except for when you're stopped. And I don't know. I don't quite understand. It's an L-head inline six, 323 cubic inches. It was the top of the line. They only 1,137 of these built. So that's not a lot. And especially 1949. That's 75 years ago. How many survived? Gosh, hard to say. Like that Cole. How many, and people say, but these cars are babied and they're taken care of and they're garaged but there's attrition. There's hurricanes and there's floods and there's tornadoes and there's fire and there's there's accidents. Not very often. You look at some of the insurance companies that insure specifically classic cars, and they'll tell you it's a pretty lucrative business because people, these cars don't get parked on the street. Right. They're not baby. They're babied like you wouldn't believe. It's a different animal than your beater daily driver.
Yeah, right, exactly. But a lot of these cars were daily drivers back in the day, and that's the thing. That's why there's so few cars of some models and makes less. I wrote up the GTX yesterday, 67 GTX, first year GTX, and they were just everyday cars.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day,
nobody thought it was like going to be a special muscle car,
right?
And now it's a legend, and who knows how many are left.
Well, you can remember that the Mopar stuff in the '60s didn't drive that great. You know, they were
right.
They were loose feeling.
Yeah,
they were different. They didn't feel. I always thought that the General Motors cars in the '60s and '70s had a much more solid feel to them than the Mopar products. Podcast
at classicautomall.com. His name's Stewart, and you can
give me all kinds of grief.
That's right.
But I don't know, the Pontiacs and the wide track that they did back in the '60s, they all just felt like they were more solid cars. And I think that the Mopar sales. When you used to see Hemi Superbirds in the mid '70s selling for $3,500 on a car lot, I mean, you think, my God, you could have bought every one of them, and you should have. So anyway, but an interesting Chrysler nonetheless. Also, the 1959 Oldsmobile Dynamic 88 Fiesta station wagon. That is the coolest thing ever.
There cannot be that many left in the country.
Light blue and Polaris white over blue and white. It was one of 11,000 built, but I guarantee you there ain't 11,000 left.
Nope.
Probably not 1,000
left. They
were
used and rusted and left out in the rain and everything.
This one's got known history from new. 371 cubic inch V8, the Jetaway automatic. Certainly the family truckster cruiser. Yeah. No question about it. And really I was going to say dynamic looking vehicle, but that's the name is a Dynamic 88. So maybe that's, par for the course.
It's got just so many curves and lines and gaps. It's just a very cool car. And stay tuned for TikTok because I want to do a video on it.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Check out our TikTok. It's quite popular. We do well on that. And our Instagram account. We're on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, as we talked about. Right. All the podcast sites, Spotify and iTunes and iHeartRadio and all of that. And including America's Web Radio, which is the first place you can hear it every Saturday at 10 a.m. So that's where the new releases come out for the first time. Right. And then they go the following Monday on all the sites.
Exactly.
And so you can get a sneak preview, if you will.
Exactly.
On the America's Web Radio.
And listen as many times as you want.
Absolutely. And last but not least, the 1965 Pontiac Lemans convertible. Boy, this thing is spectacular. Blue charcoal over blue. It's got a tri-power induction, 1966 421 cubic inch V8 in it. The Muncie M20. This thing's a beast. And it's gorgeous. It looks, it's the same body as the GTO. It's basically a GTO, a wolf in sheep's clothing or something we like to say. And it's got the Hearst edition. It looks like the Hearst edition Le Mans. It's got Hearst wheels and that really just sets it off. And then the tri-power and the 421, and then the paint job on this thing is
amazing.
Really beautiful. It
is. Yeah.
And the color is elegant, I guess would be the best word you could use to describe that color. It's just a very striking, beautiful car with a contrasting top. And it's a power top too as well, which is, comes in handy sometimes.
Wow.
Those manual tops can be a little tricky sometimes.
It's a beautiful car.
Yeah, it really is. So if you haven't seen all of these cars, or you haven't been to our place, go check them out on our website, classicautomall.com, and click on inventory. You can search by year, make, model, and we also have a reset button. So if you start searching and get too far down a rabbit hole, you hit the reset button and you can start over.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, because that happens to a lot of us sometimes. You start going a little bit too deep.
Right.
And then we're like, where are we now? This is not.
You don't have to backspace every time you want to search something new. So the reset button's a great feature.
Yeah, some of the sites are cumbersome, and I'm not saying ours is perfect. We're about due for a remake of our site. We've had it for basically the same site for about 6 years. Well, since we started,
right?
And it's time for a redo. We've cobbled together and added things on and done things, and it's probably now time to take a look at a little bit of a cosmetic restoration of our website, if you will.
Yep.
And we. The nice thing that we do is we have, almost 100 pictures of every vehicle. We're now starting to add videos to our website and to all of our other sites. So we're coming of age.
That's right. We're having a footprint, a bigger footprint.
So So if you get a chance, like I said, check out our site. And if you have any questions or comments, podcast at classicautomall.com. I'm thick-skinned. I can take it. If you have something that you don't like or didn't like what I said, a lot of this is just, I'm making it up as it happens.
Or if you've got a car story and you want to send us pictures of your cars, I think that'd be cool too.
Absolutely.
Maybe we'll talk about them next week.
Yeah, podcast, classicautomall.com.
Yep.
So we were talking a couple of weeks ago, and about where the term hot rod came from.
That's right.
We use that so often in this business, especially with us, because we deal with so many cars that are custom built.
Mm-hmm.
Customs is another word that you would use, hot rod. But they thought that maybe it started when people would say we're hotting up a car. So that means we're making it hotter, right, or faster or more powerful or more, handling wasn't really an issue with hot rods back in the day. It was all about straight line performance. And of course, Roadster, that's part of it as well too. So there's a lot of different theories on where it came from, but nobody really truly knows.
That's right.
The general term is a car modified to increase its speed and acceleration. But there was also jalopy or souped up, buggy, Tin Lizzy, Gow Jobs, G-O-W Jobs, which is, I'd never heard of that. They said that may have been the origin for hot rod. But, but in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, an automobile rebuilt or modified for high speed and fast acceleration, sometime being used probably in 1943.
How about that?
So anyway,
very cool. And souped up there is an origin to souped up too. It's something about the horses or something.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, then we talk about that.
Yeah. But anyway, interesting stuff.
Yeah, we last weekend, this being whatever the date this is, February the 7th.
Yep.
Last weekend was the Grand National Roadster Show in Pomona.
Oh, okay.
America's Most Beautiful Roadster was awarded to a friend of ours.
Okay.
Beth Myers.
Oh, Beth Myers.
Three Dog Garage.
No
out
kidding.
of Boyertown. Yeah. It's Roy Brizio built.
Huh.
It was 8 Roadsters were in the competition for the win, and hers won best in show. I don't know. It's not called best in, just called America's Most Beautiful Roadster.
How about that?
Is what it's called. It's a 1932 Ford 2-door Phaeton, and Beth Myers is the wife of Ross Myers, who owns Three Dog Garage in Boyertown, PA, and he has an amazing collection. It's private. It's not open to the public. I think you can see it if you have a group or
That's
whatever,
right.
a club or a group of guys that wanted to go see it. But they have, and they won the Riddler as well too, and they have that car in there on display. You can, and actually it's on the second floor, and there's a glass cutout that you can look up underneath the car and see how nicely it's done.
That's very cool.
Yeah, so to win the Riddler and America's Most Beautiful Roadster that's pretty much as high as it gets in the hot rod world.
Puts Boyertown on the map. Well, next to the museum.
Yeah, and it's a 2-door Phaeton, and a Phaeton is basically what they call it's basically a convertible top with no roll-up windows, no attached windows. It would have snap-in windows or not at all.
That's right.
Yeah, and of course then it was bested by the convertible, which said, "Wait a minute, we need some real windows in these things, and it needs to be sealed up a little bit better." And we're going to ruin all these cars. But Phaeton is no winding or sliding windows in the doors of the bodies. And then there's a dual cowl Phaeton, which basically dual cowl means 2 windshields or 2 compartments, if you will. And we have quite a few of Phaetons. They're Ford made Phaetons, Lincoln, Packard. I mean,
we have some in inventory.
Yeah, we have quite a few in inventory. And but the America's Most Beautiful Roadster is really been won by everybody that you could imagine over the years. Boyd Coddington and Roy Brizio, Troy Trepanier, George Barris, John Batera, Chip Foose. I can't imagine what you have to spend in order to win America's Most Beautiful Roadster. No different than going to Pebble Beach and winning Best in Show.
Sure.
I mean, it's a big check you write for something like that.
When you said there's a Roadster show. First of all, it's like it was 32 degrees last week. So to think like you're thinking car show and roadsters and hot rods, it's like, but California,
Pomona. Of course, it was probably, they've had some crappy weather, a little rain.
Crazy.
Had a little bit of rain out there, but it's really, it's interesting the theme that people do when they, when they do these cars and the special touches they put on them and all that stuff. This thing's got a Roush 427 with a 500 horsepower on a Tremec 5-speed and a Winters V8 quick change rear end. I mean, this thing does a Brookville steel body, flames on it. It's got the convertible top.
Wow.
It's unique in its presentation, which is interesting because they basically the 32 Ford Roadsters are basically what this award was built around. And of course, now I think it can be anything 1937 and older. I can't remember if that was right or not. I'm going to have to look at my notes, but I can't remember that. Now, see, how stupid am I? If I would write everything down like I did, then, you would.
Open to 37 and earlier.
37 and earlier.
Yep.
Thanks for seeing that for me.
So roadster pickups, Phaetons, touring cars as well.
And touring cars. So anything 37 or older that fits into that, convertible, if you will, then that fits in the category. And then they have another award, which is the Al Slonaker Award, which is the guy who founded the Grand National Roadster Show. And this is everything but a 37 or earlier Ford. And it was won by a 59 Impala, which is just over the top. I mean, it's just the craziest thing you've ever seen. So anyway, congratulations to the Meyers. And next week, we'll get to talk about my pet peeve in drive-thrus.
Oh, good.
So
drive-through what? Wendy's?
Any
drive-through.
I'm not picking Wendy's. I'm not picking on any particular maker model.
That sounds like a good topic.
It's an excellent topic.
I've got a lot of pet peeves out there.
I bet you I've trumped all of them with what I've got. Anyway, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next week on the Classic Auto Mall podcast. We'll see you then.
You've been listening to the Classic Auto Mall podcast with your host, Stuart Howden, executive producer Steve Safir, produced and engineered by yours truly, J.R. Russ. Thanks for listening and sharing the Classic Auto Mall podcast. Available on classicautomall.com, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Music courtesy of the Pat Travers Band, produced by Car Smarts Media. Copyright all rights reserved.